let's get going. So thank you everyone for making time and taking some time out of your evening to join us. I am one of the trio behind the Delivery Space podcast. I'm Nisha. There is a lovely story behind how the Delivery Space podcast got started, and I'll let my co-host Sharon Williams talk to you about that in a second. What we'll be doing in this session is that we'll be covering the story behind our setup of the podcast, the tips that we can give around designing your podcast as well, if you're interested in doing the same, why the delivery podcast is so important to us, so you can get an insight into our thinking for why we got that, how we set it up, and also why we set it up in the first place, the equipment we use, things that can go wrong, so it's always good to understand areas that we've learned from and continuous improvement that we carry on making to the Delivery Space podcast, and what you can expect from us, what you can expect from our podcast, what can you expect from our content. Over to you, Sharon.
Thanks, Nisha. So just to give you a flavour of a bit more about us, so like Nisha said, there are three of us involved in the podcast, and this picture here is actually us collecting an award for a group called Furlan, and it's a non-profit organisation, and it's actually how Nisha and myself met. So if you could go to the next slide, please, Nisha. So the creative minds behind the podcast. So we've got Arishay Williams, and he is our video and sound editor and genius in terms of making myself and Nisha look and sound as good as possible, which of course is really important if you're going to venture into podcasting. People want good quality. There's then Nisha, who's a podcast co-host. She's an Agile coach and a delivery consultant. And then there's myself, a podcast co-host, and I'm also a PMO director. So a little bit more about me. So like I said, I'm a PMO director at a company called BW&C Consulting, and I've been working in PMOs for about the last 15 years now. And I really love what I do, and I'm passionate about what I do. And I essentially help clients to deliver their business outcomes through governance and frameworks, and making sure they get a return on their investment, essentially. I've worked across quite a large number of industries, from financial services right through to real estate, but the same principles apply. And I love listening to podcasts. So when we spent most of our time in offices, I would always be listening to a podcast to and from my journey. I learn a lot from them, and I get a lot out of it personally. I also like cooking, and I'm known to go to the gym frequently. So that's a little flavour on who I am, and I'll pass over to Arishay.
Hello, everyone. Hi, my name is Arishay Williams. I'm a project coordinator. As you said earlier, I'm the video and audio editor on the Delivery Space podcast. I'm a project coordinator. I've been doing it for actually over 15 years in IT for financial services, government organizations, private manufacturing, military. A lot of things over the last 15 years I've been doing up and down the country, United Kingdom, and also working with teams internationally also. More so now I do transformation projects from one IT system to the other, and also digital transformations or physical network transformations on IT networks. I'm also into health. I started a supplement company with some rare supplements from algae, as well as I'm crossing over into thermography, as analyzing people heat structures to see what type of illnesses they may or may not have. So I've done a fair bit over the last couple of years, and I look forward with the podcast and see how far it will go.
Thanks, Arishay. I also want to add, Arishay provides all sorts of direction to Sharon and I on lighting, on sound. Where he puts us is where we go, because that is what makes a podcast look really good, sound really good. So yeah, a lot of work, and we do it. We shoot over the weekends, right? So we make Arishay kind of help us out early Sunday mornings. So yeah, we're grateful for everything that Arishay does to help us. So yeah, you already know me, Sharon introduced me. I'm an Agile coach, delivery consultant. I love, in my downtime, learning about things that I'm generally curious about. I love reading. I love also, because I've been brought up in the 80s and 90s, old episodes of Only Fools and Horses and Blackadder. I use those to just lighten the mood and kind of transport me back to a state of nostalgia. So that's me.
Sure. So a little bit about our backstory then. So as I mentioned, myself and Nisha at the start of the pandemic joined an online community called Furlearn, and their mission was to support furloughed people back into employment. So Nisha was actually helping with the project management side of things, as well as blogging, same as me. And I was blogging and helping with content creation. And I think, we just found that we sparked a lot of common interest between us. Our values aligned, and the more we spoke, the more we found out that, we had lots of things in common. And one of the things that we both had in common is that we kind of wanted to give back to a community and create our own community. So that's one of the reasons why we then kind of got talking about the podcast, is building our own little community, which will be our space where we can share our experiences and learn from other people. And one of the great things about podcasting and Furlearn is the sense of network. So we found it both really beneficial and really important to expand our networks out. And you get to learn so much from meeting different people. Everybody's obviously got different experiences in different industries, and it's just great to hear how they solve problems. Great learning for myself and Nisha. So that feeds into the knowledge share aspect of it, which is really important for us, that we create a space where people can openly share their knowledge and learnings. And then also that feeds into self-development. So, we are constantly learning. Nisha and myself call us lifelong learners, and we'll never stop learning. And by hosting our own podcast, we have to go away and learn and research new things. And we learn from our guests. So all of it just feeds into our lifelong learning, and we love it. So that's a little bit about our backstory.
Okay, guys. So how many of you listen to podcasts today? We have a quick show of hands. Okay, I can see. Look, there you go. Majority of our hands are going up on the session. These are some interesting stats, guys, that I pulled from statista.com recently. And you can see the steady increase in the number of listeners. The age group of the listeners that are listening to podcasts is from about 20. The largest age group is from 26 to 35. I kind of disagree with that, because I'm just out of that age group, and I know there's a lot of my peers listen to podcasts, so I take that with a pinch of salt. But hey, the listening behavior is whilst driving, and as Sharon said, commuting. I also listen while I'm going hell for leather on the cross trainer in the gym. Just sparks off new ideas. It helps me with my learning and my motivation as well. And the listening device of choice is the smartphone, used by the largest share of the UK audience. Does anyone know what the top podcast in the UK is at the moment? No? don't Google it, because I'll be able to tell. So the top podcast is the Joe Rogan Experience, if you listen to that. The second top podcast, so it's the Joe Rogan Experience. The second one,
it was the Diary of a CEO.
Diary of a CEO,
Yeah.
Stephen Bartlett. Yes, that's it. Because I was thinking, was it the High Performance podcast? But I was thinking that there's a bias there, because that's my favorite. That was coming into my head. But recommend those, definitely. The third one I was really surprised by. So the third highest listened podcast, according to chartable.com, in terms of like the highest listened to on Spotify, is a white noise podcast. A relaxing white noise podcast, which I was quite surprised by, but I get why that is. But yeah, so the stats show that there is a steady increase. That and if you look at the pandemic years, there's quite a significant increase there from the tail end of 29 all the way to 2021. A very significant increase in terms of how people are getting entertained, getting inspired, educated, etc. So our delivery space podcast, guys, the main motivation, as Sharon said, in the delivery space, behind the delivery space podcast, is to bring everyday practical experiences of delivery to our listeners. So we think about that's the main big idea behind the delivery space podcast. We're in a time where organizations are changing the way they work. Teams are changing the way they work. They want to move to, for want of a better word, a more agile mindset. They want to make sure that they are performing well, that they are achieving results for the companies that they work for to stay competitive in the marketplace. And our big idea is around making sure that those everyday practical experiences are brought to our audience that work within that delivery space, so that it can inspire people working in the delivery space, regardless of their role, can connect and resonate with challenges that are experienced, successes for people running projects, programs, working on great products that they're releasing. So that's our big idea. And we're going to take you through the next couple of slides, some really great aspects to designing your podcast. If you're thinking of doing that, these are areas that we've thought about that may help you. So the first one is your idea. So think about what you can talk about for the long term. So say, for example, I'd be useless doing a podcast on cooking. Sharon would be excellent, but I'm no culinarily, I can't even say that word. I am not good in the kitchen. But yeah, so I would talk about an area that I love, and I can see that area is going to develop over time and evolve into great topics that we can really engage with our audience. Talking of audience, think about who your target listener is. What kind of problem do you want to solve for that listener? What age group is that listener in? Where do they do majority of their learning, their interacting? What platforms are they using? And what are they curious about? A great place to do some of that research is LinkedIn. So Sharon and I monitored LinkedIn and our feeds in terms of the chats that was going on, and the comments that were appearing, the topics that people are talking about, and also we let our curiosity guide a lot of the content as well. So that brings me on to that content and the research that we have done. We also tapped into a lot of those within our network that we got to know, funnily enough, during the pandemic. So during the pandemic, we expanded our network. Sharon and I were working, but we also were kind of tapping in to different areas of knowledge. We're letting our curiosity guide us, trying to connect with other people where we needed to supplement our own skills as well. So for example, I wanted to get better at facilitation. So I networked with those within my network who were really good and were masters at facilitation to understand how they approach that. So let your curiosity guide you and really try and understand what people are curious about in the field that you want to talk about. And then the last one on this page is around releasing. Think about what your release schedule actually looks like for your podcast. So there's a big part here, and Sharon and I spent a good few weeks mulling this over and talking about this and organizing this in terms of not only when you're going to release your podcast, but also how you're going to create that pre-launch buzz so that your listeners know and start getting attuned to the rhythm of which you're going to send out and circulate your podcast to. They get used to seeing your announcements, your posts, your branding, and we'll go on to that in a minute, of your podcast in their feeds.
Can I just add to that last one,
Sure.
Nisha, on releasing? I would just say, when you think about your release schedule, just make sure it's a frequency that you can commit to, and that you're not, stretching yourself, so committing to releasing loads of content several times a week, and then you quickly burn out. So that's something that Nisha and I thought about. We thought about what we can produce consistently. So yeah, think about that.
Yeah, consistency is definitely the key, guys. I'm also, like us, if you're running a full-time job at the same time, or a business, then fitting the time commitment into a podcast involves sacrifice of what you now think some of your free time is. So, again, we've got plenty of stories around that, where we try to carve out that time so that we're not sacrificing time with friends and family, and we can get the downtime that we need to keep us being productive. So think about the format. Are you going to be is it going to be a solo podcast? Are you going to co-host? Are you going to interview guests? Sharon and I have gone for the co-host to share and showcase our own skills, but we've also gone for a combination as well, because we interview others who can bring their practical experiences of delivery, whether it's an aspect of agile coaching, or whether it's how to apply a large-scale framework and some experiences around that area, large-scale Scrum framework, and experiences around that area. Think about how you're going to market your podcasts and on what platforms, and that's closely tied to where you believe your audience is present on social media. So think about it in terms of a post calendar. We use manual posting to start off with, and now we'd like to transition to a posting scheduler that will post our podcast posts out regularly. Think about how much time, as Sharon said, that's going to be devoted to marketing your podcasts, because you're going to be doing your pre-launch, you're going to be doing it to announce that your podcast is coming, then you'll be marketing your podcast once it's arrived, and once you've distributed the audio files and the video files. So ours goes out on Spotify right now and YouTube, and we're going to be experimenting with releasing those audio files onto Apple soon. So Sharon and I have spoken about that, but in true Agile fashion, we experiment. So we've trialed it on those two platforms at the moment, and then we'll expand onto others. But think about that, and also think about post-launch as well. So how, if you've got like a half-hour podcast where you're interviewing someone and you're learning from their practical experiences, you have got so much knowledge that they're sharing, so many great snippets, so much great content. So think about chopping that up into micro bits of content as well, and that will help you market those posts on an ongoing basis. Last one is around your cover art. Podcast branding and identity and cover art. So you'll need to decide whether you produce your own design. This is a self-financed passion project of mine, Sharon and Shay's. So we did this ourselves, but you may wish to outsource it. It is an option for you. Always experiment, that's what I'd say, in terms of your podcast length too, guys. So where you might have a really chunky topic that you can talk about. We're currently looking at our recordings that we might have and breaking them up so that they're more digestible for our audiences. Literally pocket-sized podcasts. I'm going to hand over to Sharon now. She's going to talk to you about why the delivery space is so important to us.
Thanks, Nisha. So like Nisha has just mentioned there, we definitely take an experimental approach with the podcast. And I think it's a great way to look at things, because we try things, we listen to the feedback, and then if it doesn't quite work, no problem, we adapt it, and we adapt it quickly. And I think if you kind of look at things that way, then there's no resistance to changing things. So we've made several changes along the way since we started. And I think naturally, when you start your own podcast, it will be the same for you. So just remember, nothing is set in stone, really. Listen to feedback, listen to what your viewers or listeners are saying, and just give it a go, try something different. So like Nisha said, we are looking at different hosting platforms, we're looking at more automation, we are looking at ways to recycle our content, because actually we've got a good solid, probably like 2 years worth of content that we would have built up by the end of this year. So it's just how we get creative and splice that content now. Diversity was another important aspect for us, and this was it's a special place that we've created, and we wanted to make sure that this environment represented a diverse range of people that reflected both Nisha and myself, but also people that we felt were perhaps unheard a little bit in the corporate environment. So because it's a space that we've created for ourselves, we can really open it up and have a diverse range of guests join us. We take a really holistic approach to looking at delivery too. So it's not just about the specific delivery or the business outcome, so to speak. So we also look at things like mental health and the importance that plays in delivery. We've had a guest come on who is a single mom, talk about her career journey into delivery and what that looks like. We have people from outside of project delivery, so to speak, but are delivering things, share their experiences. So recently we had a property developer come in, and he spoke a lot about mindset and how he achieved results in his business. So it's really diverse, and I love that, because it's delivery to us is very diverse, it's so wide, and that's how we get the most learnings. And finally, it's fun. Nisha, Arisha and I make this a fun experience. Don't take yourselves too seriously, and you need to kind of, if you are doing it with other people, work with people that you can really bounce off, because yes, there is a work element to it. You put in a lot of time and effort, but when you're working with the right people, it's also so much fun. And we have moments where we'll just burst into fits of laughter, or just something will mess up and we'll just laugh about it, because that's life. So remember to have fun on your journey, and that will reflect in your podcast.
So guys, this covers the main motivations for why we set up the Delivery Space podcast. As Sharon said, our values and behaviours aligned. We also value very much the experiential side of the delivery space. People want to know how successful projects are delivered. They see an innovation. I see an innovation, and I want to understand how that was developed. What was the senior leadership like that drove that? What was the high-performing team like that drove that? What was their mindset like? I want to know. I want to get under the covers and figure that out. I'd love to hear from others who have enjoyed those and been part of those experiences. Over to you, Sharon.
So in terms of values and behaviours, like I touched on, Nisha and I found that our values aligned quite quickly from the charity group that I mentioned, Furlan. And we wanted to make sure that these values and behaviours were also replicated in the podcast. So rather than just focusing on the technical side only, it was important to look at some of these behaviours, because we feel that it's those behaviours that really drive successful delivery. And like I mentioned, we wanted to look at behaviours across a very diverse number of industries and sectors and experiences, whether that be people who are kind of like CTO level, like I said, a property developer. We've got someone from the Board of Amnesty International coming on, so it's very diverse. Nisha mentioned innovation, and we are definitely advocates of innovation and creativity. And one of the ways in which I think you can really boost innovation and creativity is through meeting different people and exploring different experiences to your own. So it is important that, when we're looking at our guests and who we can speak with, it's not confined to just people who we already know in our own sectors, in our own circles. We have purposely ventured out to see how other people do things. And, it's brilliant for creativity. And even between Nisha and myself, we've got different specialisms. So it sparks that diverse thought. Teamworking. So again, it provides a lovely opportunity for teamwork between the three of us, and we get to learn from each other. So Nisha mentioned about Arisha helping us with like lighting and setup, and just thinking about the visual presentation of things in terms of how we display it. And all of this is really important, because when people go to look at videos or listen to your audio, they do want good quality. So when you bring together the right team, you can learn so much from each other. And then finally, we've mentioned before, but it's really key, is networking. So expanding out your network has so many benefits. It might help you in terms of opportunities. So Nisha and I have had speaking engagements as a result of the podcast, and most recently I was invited to speak at the House of Commons, and that's because they saw the great things that we're doing through the podcast, and they really loved it. So always remember the power of your networks. It opens you up to opportunity, learnings, and it's just a great way to expand that diverse thinking.
Cheers, Sharon. I just want to tell a quick story. Hopefully it will amuse the guys that have tuned in. But you see that picture on the top right hand? That was Sharon and I trying to bring some levity to the nervousness we were feeling when we recorded our first trailer. So our first trailer for the podcast went out 10th of November, I think it was. And we sacrificed watching the Strictly Halloween special to record it on a Saturday evening. That's dedication for you. You can even see that Nisha and Sharon intro recording. But yeah, that was us trying to joke about and play about with Canva, but also trying to make that session come to life.
Thanks,
No worries. I will also add to the networking. So guys, if you want to start up a podcast and you get going, do not be scared to collaborate with other fellow podcasters. The delivery space is so vast that there are others who are focusing in more specialized areas. So I'll give you an example. I was curious about LESS, the large scale Scrum framework, and how that's applied. I've only done a beginner's course on it during lockdown, and I was curious about how that can actually be applied, how it is effective. So I collaborated with a friend of mine that's running a podcast specifically on LESS to try and bring that thinking to the delivery space and vice versa onto their podcast as well, and sharing some of my experiences. So that, following on from Sharon's point, collaboration and networking is key so that you can bring the really, really good content that resonates with your audience. Okay, so we'll go through the podcast creation process that we go through. so that you have an overview of it. So as we said, we plan the content, think about what our audience wants to hear about, let our curiosity guide us. We think about whether that's content that Sharon and I can generate, and or whether that's content that can be delivered by some speakers within our network or speakers that we would like to network with. We agree a topic with our speakers, and then we schedule. So we have, as Sharon said, a schedule of about 2 years worth of content. Luckily, touch wood, anyone that we've approached for it hasn't said no. And in fact, Philly is coming on to talk about influencing change as an Agile coach, I think around October time. So yeah, we're looking forward to having Philly on for that.
So we brief our speakers so they know what format the podcast takes, timings, running order, and that kind of thing. Then we do the actual recording, and like it's written there, that's the actual fun bit. And then Arishe gets to work and he edits and makes us look good and sound good, and then we release. So I'm going to hand over to Arishe, who's just going to run through some of the podcast equipment that you might need to get going.
Okay, everyone. This whole podcast situation, as far as equipment, is how long's a piece of string? It really depends on what your budget is and what you're intending to do. But at minimum, you're going to need at least a USB microphone that's ultimately not the ones necessarily that you get with headphone sets, but maybe something a little substantial. Reason being is that if you're doing a podcast and you want to edit the audio, and for whatever reason, you want to have more information than less. So the more information you pick up or the more sound you pick up, the better. So in our situation, we have some economical mics. They're around 75 pounds, and microphones can go from 10 pounds to thousands of pounds. But what I would suggest is you guys get a microphone, at least starting out with 100 pounds or less, just to get going. Now, this depends on how your setup actually is. Maybe it's in your office, maybe it's in your living room, depends on where it is, but you might need a boom stand. Those are sort of the stands that you see in most podcasts that are hanging in a little arm that holds the microphone. Or you can just get a generic stand, and that would depend on what microphone you get. So there's a microphone called the Yeti. That's a little over 100 pounds, but that particular microphone has a lot broader range, so you can hold it on a stand that's sitting right in front of you. But as I said, if you just want to start out something sub 100. It really just depends on what you're trying to do, what level you're trying to go to. Now, this is where I think a lot of people get confused. So when you see podcasts, video-based podcasts, you usually see them on YouTube or you see them on some other platform. And everyone sees a very high definition picture, but you have no idea how they made that. You can get something that's a couple of 100 pounds on a 500 pounds to 5,000 pounds. And that's kind of like what you see on YouTube, despite on what they might claim they're using. But for us, and for people who are starting out, I would suggest you get a high definition 1080p camera. Now, the standard webcam that you get in a laptop will be a 720. That is probably standard issue on pretty much every manufacturer. But I would suggest you get something as a 1080 so that you can have something to work with, because, as I said before, it's best to have more information than less. And the reason why I'm suggesting the 1080 is because that's what is classified as high definition. There's 2K cameras, that's the level above that, and then you have your 4K cameras, that's the level above that. I just say stick within your budget and what you think, what you can afford. But this is a very diverse area. You can get lost very quickly of different manufacturers and different styles, and it's very difficult to identify which one that you would want. But I would say just stick within your budget and don't go beyond that for if you're just starting out. We kind of talked about no, we talked about microphones. I apologize. So the earphones are similar to what I have on my headset right now, or similar to what Sharon has. I would say stay sub 50 pounds with a headset, because that's really not much what it's only for what you can hear. It's not going to be something that is going to affect your production, except for getting feedback from the microphone. So the reason why most people use headphones, sorry, I keep mixing this up, mixing up earphones, is because we don't want the sound projecting out of your device and hitting the microphone and then getting fed back in. So you want a nice clean signal. So this is why we use headphones. Now, it's not really that important. If you want a nice look, that's up to you. You can go down the nice look fashionable route. But in reality, all we're trying to do is block the sound from being fed into the microphone. So now, this is another rabbit hole you can get mixed up with, but all you really need is at least one LED light and a light source from the sun or on a window or something like that. But if you have constraints, whereby you don't have a window, you're going to need at least 2 LED lights. Now, they range. And the same way we talked about the microphone and the same way we talked about the headset. Stick within your budget, something sub 100 pounds. And the reason why I say that is because there's just so many out there on the market. And if you stick around the sub 100 pounds, you're going to get something decent, unless you're using a very special camera, above HD camera. Now, the reason why I mentioned that is because sometimes you may watch videos where you see a flicker or a wave going across when the video is happening. Now, that's happening because the camera can see faster than the light actually pulses. So it picks up that flash that the human eye can't usually see, but the camera does, and then it represents that. So really, you want something around 35 pounds or so, should have a good refresh rate that won't get picked up by most webcams. And it needs to go up to 56 Kelvin. Now, that's a measurement of light, and that's the measurement of roughly daylight. And the reason why you want that is because the lights that we have in our, just in general, that we have in the ceiling or a lamp is around 32 Kelvin, which is the orangey yellowy color. And what you don't want to do is mix that orangey color with the white. It doesn't look right. It doesn't look good on skin tones, no matter what race you come from. It doesn't look right. So you either want to have all white or all yellow. Either you don't want to mix the two together. You can see that spec on the LED light that you are looking to purchase. It will tell you it goes from 32 to 56 or above that. But what you're looking for is around 56 Kelvin. Now, the editing software, we use Adobe, the Adobe Cloud. That's around about 50, 52, 56 pounds a month. And it doesn't just come with a video editor and a sound editor. It comes with a whole suite of applications, Photoshop, as well as a whole host of different editing stuff on Lightroom for pictures and things like that. So you can get them in smaller packages for cheaper, but to get a well-rounded package, it would be the one in that range that I discussed earlier. You do not have to use them. You can use free editing software and things of that nature, but the challenge with that is that you're going to find a good editor here, and then you might want to look for another sound. You can have all these other applications where the Adobe package has it all in one seamless sort of ecosystem. But I do know people who are using a program called Audacity, which is a good sound editor. And if you have an Apple, there's Final Cut Pro, which is free as far as I know with it. That's the benefit with Apple as well. But you're going to have probably multiple bits of software that you're going to need to, if you're doing video, that is, to make that clean up your audio and clean up your video. That's pretty much it, really. You just need at a worst case scenario, you're going to need 2 lights, you're going to need a microphone, and you're going to need some earphones to stop feedback coming through, and at least a 1080p webcam. So I think that's pretty much all of it for me. If anyone has any questions later, just let me know.
Thanks, Shay. So I guess like the clear message from that is you don't have to sync hundreds and hundreds in creating your own podcast or need a fancy recording studio. I'm upstairs in my loft room right now. So we make it work with what we have, right, guys? All right. So things that can go wrong will go wrong. These are lessons that we've learned whilst we've been recording and been up for the past 6 months producing podcasts. One of them is speaker availability. Sometimes life happens and at last minute speakers may not come available, may interrupt your schedule. You might have to shift orders around for sequences around. It might impact your release schedule, but there's always a way to roll along with it, and there's always speakers within the schedule that may want to come up within the order of release or the order of interview that you can slot in. So there's always areas that you can use to resolve that issue. We had another fun glitch that appears from time to time. So the booster that doesn't give the boost. As I said, I work in the loft room upstairs, and on Sunday mornings, sometimes my booster does not work. And so the recording looks a little bit jittery to my eyes. And so I have to spend the time imagining Sharon when the video doesn't display, or the speaker in the recording software when the speaker doesn't display, and cannot give that away during the time when I'm actually asking questions or responding. But that's effectively what happens, and you have to roll with it because you've assigned that recording time and your speaker has given up that time on a Sunday morning to spend with you. So sometimes equipment can give out and you can have upload speeds, from the dark ages, because we've come to expect a lot of instant access and high response speeds over the internet. But sometimes there are interruptions that happen and equipment that fails. Sharon, over to you.
So Risha, did you want to touch on the software glitches? Because I think you can give an example of a few that we've faced.
Okay, I mean, the usual issues you get is the service provider that provides you with your recording software can make updates without you knowing about it, and that could interact with hardware like your microphone or your video camera and things like that, and you may need to do an update or a update for that so it can work, or you may not need to do any updates at all or not go to the new version of that software that your provider runs. Sometimes they tell you, well, there's a new update, you need to update this software, or it's the service, like the cloud service we use. It just happens without us knowing, and we just have to deal with what a wreckage it does hardware-wise. The same with your video editing software. I deal with Adobe, and every now and again they make drastic changes to the look and feel, and sometimes we need to upgrade the drivers in our hardware, like the sound, the video, for video cards, for example. Glitches during the software we've had where recently the software decided not to record the video anymore. It said it ran out of space, even though there's loads of space, and there's just an issue with the browser and this new recording software. So software glitches could be literally anything, and they're usually dynamic changes by either the manufacturer of your hardware or the manufacturer of your software, and they can happen at pretty much any time.
Thank you. And then USB ports from hell and laptop lapses. Yes, Nisha and I have suffered from faulty USB ports on our laptop, which means, you know, you'll have your mic plugged in and then it suddenly stops working or keeps disconnecting because of a loose port. So we've both got adapters now and use that. And laptop lapses. I've had my laptop die at the start of a recording and quickly had to swap out. So these things do happen. It's just part of life. Things go wrong sometimes, but still persist. You know, it happens to everybody. So what you can expect from our podcast is I like to think of each session as a bit of a mini coaching session. Each podcast is a comms tool that shares practical experience, and it's from people's practical experience that we get the most learning, because it's one thing to read something in a book, but that doesn't translate into reality. So this is where you get the gems. And our guests are experts in their fields, and they share what they're passionate about, and they share their challenges as well as their successes. And like I said, it's holistic. So it's delivery, but it's also considering things like well-being, personal development, and how overall and in a holistic sense you can get the best results.
Thanks, Sharon, and thanks everyone for listening to us and giving up your time in the evening. Please follow us on the Delivery Space on our LinkedIn page. I know Bianca will share with you the links. If you'd like to come on the podcast and you have something to say, do get in touch with Sharon and myself. We would love for you to come on and also to support us. We provide regular links on the LinkedIn page in terms of what we're doing, when podcasts are releasing, and great content that we share with you. Thank you guys for having us on.
Thank you very much.